Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hollands for Sound of the Movies. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by Oscar nominated cinematographer Donald McAlpine. Over the course of his great career, he has shot films such as King David, Breaker Morant, Predator, The Hard Way, The Edge, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Parenthood, Stanley and Iris, Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger, Anger Management, X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Time Machine, The Chronicles of Narnia, Medicine Man, 9 Months, The Man Without a Face, Mrs. Doubtfire, Romeo and Juliet, Moulin Rouge, Ender's Game, The Dressmaker, The Portable Door, and many more. On today's episode, we will also cover the 30th anniversary of Clear and Present Danger. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Donald McAlpine.
Hello, great to talk with you. 30 years, a long time ago.
A long time ago, and as I mentioned in my introduction, you have quite the filmography and you have been a part of this great business for many years. I love Clear and Present Danger. I also love Patriot Games. Those are two of my favorites of the 90s. And how and when did you meet Phillip Noyce, and when did it become obvious that you were going to work together?
Well, I was just totally selected. Phil, I mean, by the time we got that far into my career, the process of getting a job was nearly always uh, the director asked the producer for me, and maybe several others, I don't know. And then the producer rings the agent, and then the agent rings you. Uh, I had no, I would have known Phil, but not as a uh, close friend or anything like that. And as far as I can recall, I would have got a call from my agent asking me if I wanted to do it. And I did. I did want to do it. I read the script and I'd seen some of the earlier stuff that Phil had done. He did a thing down here called Newsfront, uh, which was a very elaborate bit of storytelling in what was a very primitive um, filmmaking industry in Australia. So I was always impressed with that, and we became very good friends, and it was it was great fun to work with. I mean, through the two movies we worked with together on, he was he was an amazing person and an amazing storyteller. I think if you can extract that essence from a film, he's probably as good, if not the best storyteller I've actually worked with.
I spoke to Philip about a week ago, and I always liked his films. And he has directed magnificent pictures, and he comes across as a very nice man and also very determined and also painstaking in his method. So, and you've worked with many directors, of course. Philip, you worked with John McTiernan, you worked with Chris Columbus, and many other people. So how does Philip stand out when compared to other filmmakers?
As I said, his ability as a storyteller was fantastic. Uh, I don't want to draw too many comparisons because they're all my friends and I want to keep it that way. His ability in those action dramas, I really think they would have been hard pressed to get a better director at that point in time. Uh, the way he could just keep all the balls in the air. I mean, none of it's shot sequentially. Two scenes that butt together can be 3 months apart, and as with any movie making, but his ability to remember and I mean, he's originally legally trained as a barrister, and um, that he had that sort of a, a clinical mind. Uh, that's not to say that he didn't have the heart and the essence that a good director needs. He has certainly had that.
Cinematographically speaking, which opportunities did Patriot Games in Clear and Present Danger present and offer back then?
Oh, a wonderful opportunity to tell story without the Mace Newfield, the producer I mostly work with on that film, um, really sort of got the concept of spending money to produce excellence on the screen. Uh, and Phil got that for him, but Mace had to find the money, and the people have the money, but they often don't appreciate the best way of spending it. And the producers on both those films were the same, were really, really good at investing in, and this then really puts my opportunities as my part of the storytelling process, taking pictures at a really high level. Uh, and, I truly enjoyed that part of it very, very much. Yes. Normally you're battling to, you get it, but you waste so much energy and you tend to lose opportunities in the energy you waste. That's the real story.
Right, thank you. And of course, before an inch of film is even shot, pre production is a vital part of any filmmaking process. So, in your experience, what must not be neglected at this early stage of the production so you can really run a smooth operation?
It's very interesting. I'm trying to take my mind back to the pre-production on this particular film. I mean, every film is different. The pre-production work, from my point of view, was probably more limited on this than anything else because the sets aren't built. The I mean, Bruce and I, not Bruce and I, Phil and I would have talked about um, the way the story was going to develop and start to pre-visualize it a bit. But from the camera's point of view, on a detailed film like this, it's not till you get that detail that you can start to decide how you're going to use it to tell the story in the best way you can. So there was probably, for the camera on this, less pre-production than you may anticipate. I mean, the director's got a whole different level of pre-production participation. The performances in this was such that they almost came out of the day's shooting. I'm sure there was pre-discussions between the director and the actors, but most of it evolved on the set. And in those days we were given time to do that sort of stuff. Now, of course, there's just no. It's a well. I've been working in television more recently, and it's a very challenging and interesting, and if anyone can get a good quality production on television, they really have to be complimented because they've done it with very, very limited support compared to what we had in the good old days.
Why do you think that has changed? Is it simply because, or is it a budgetary reason? Is it simply because they want to get things done faster so they can save money? Or
I've thought about this a bit, in the recent years, and when I first got into the business and almost by accident crashed into Hollywood, the standing of the director and the director of photography was something that you just can't imagine today. I'm talking about the fact that you'd arrive at Los Angeles airport and the representative of the studio would come and visit you in first class, take you down a ramp, but there'd be a limo waiting at the bloody bottom of the stairs to take you to the hotel. By the time I was finishing in Hollywood with the same sort of prestigious work, I was flying business class and getting my rental to drive myself to the hotel. I mean, that's just a very simple explanation of in the early days, the director of photography, the cameraman was the sole custodian of the image for 24, 48 hours. Nobody had seen anything other than the operator, who was looking at a little inch by half an inch vision on a ground glass, and he was the only one who had actually seen anything. And then, of course, the video split came, and we spent a lot of time watching grey ghosts move around, and then the video split eventually got to being a reasonably high quality coloured thing, and now we instantaneously watch what's very, very close to the final product, and we all know the tools available to alter it to exactly the finished product that we want. It's just the fact that in those early days you were absolutely responsible for every dollar spent, for that 48 hours or 24 hours, and now it's everyone can become a judge on the set about what it's actually looking like. Yeah. So it's in cinematography particularly, the whole thing is diminished. It's still great fun. My enjoyment of the process was enhanced. I love the fact that I can now see the possibilities, if not the actual final result on a screen on the set. I insist always on having at least a 40-inch screen on set for myself, and I have somebody adjust that so it works. So I have that. I can actually make that. I can get the impact of the shot the way I want it, or feel the inadequacies of what's in front of me and try to correct them and make it better.
Of course, back then that was a different story in terms of creating a look for a film, as you just pointed out. How would you describe the look and how the script for Clear and Present Danger was interpreted, and how it may be different from Patriot Games?
I don't think there was a great deal of difference between the two films in that approach. In actual fact, I get very confused about which film I'm talking about occasionally, because of the similarities of cast and the similarities of story. They're very both similar, and I often think, oh, that scene was in that film. No, it was in the other film. They, from my point of view, visually, they were a bit of a sequel.
What was your takeaway from those two films, Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger, something that helped you later on in your career?
That's an interesting question because, in actual fact, I try very, very hard to dismiss any reference to previous films I've done. I know in my mind associations must be happening, but I really, really work very, very hard to avoid saying this is like a scene out of such and such. I'll do it that way. No, because if that's the case, then you know I don't think you should be there. You should be just everything I do, the lighting, the camera placement, uh, it all comes from the organic situation I'm in. The script, the actor, the story, the tension, all those factors, and they're to me should be the driving and um, reference that you're working to, not to any previous job you've done. Uh, yeah, I very rarely find myself referring to other films. Yeah.
How do you need to manage and run a set in order not to fall behind schedule? Because somebody must be breathing down your neck. A producer, it's all about the money. And sometimes you only have an actor for 1 week before they move on to another project. So the lighting only is perfect for 1 or 2 hours. So how do you actually make that work?
First of all, you decide how sincere the request is. But assuming that you believe it's sincere, then it behoves you uh, to make every effort you can. I mean, the producer, they're often maligned, and I mean they've got a terrible job. They've got uh, a, a, a limited bag of money generally, uh, and it's got to go the distance. Uh, and it's generally not easy unless they're backed by a big studio, and even there, uh, it's I've got great respect for uh, their function of making the money go the distance, and and I will clearly point out. I said, this scene could be so much better if I had so much more time, but I can go through here, and it's going to be good, but it's not going to be as good as it would have been if I had the other $10,000 to do whatever it is. But it that's it. It's the game you play. You can't just throw your hands in the air and walk away. You can, but not very often.
Some parts of Clear and Present Danger were shot in Mexico, as I understand, but it had been
Yes.
discussed. But it had been discussed to do it in Colombia, if I remember correctly. But still, going from Colombia to Mexico posed some challenges, as I understand. Do you recall what happened?
We sent a second unit to Colombia uh, to pick up a few of the shots. Um, Now, Mexico worked very, very well. The most wonderful scene in that was uh, the four-wheel drives uh, being bailed up in that street, right? Well, that was all done in a football ground in Mexico. We built that whole street, and and Phil insisted on using real explosives, and so we had to have all the cameras inside, 100 mils of timber protection, uh, and we had one camera on a 100-foot lift cherry picker, at the end of this fiction street of ours, looking right down the street, and it had a camera on it. And we finished one shot, and they called cut, and the guy was opening up the camera to check it, and a piece of shrapnel fell out of the sky into the bucket, and it was actually very dangerous. In retrospect, maybe stupid, but it certainly was effective. The explosions in that, this is way before the days of special effects. That whole scene. If you look at it and realise now that every time something blows up, it blows up, and it was a wonderful bit of storytelling because it's quite, you understand exactly what's going on between the guys on the roof and the guys in the car, but it is in actual fact quite complex. They're going back and forwards in this one little bit of street we managed to build on a football ground.
And that was a big scene. And as you just said, those were the days when the real thing was used. I know that some directors and filmmakers today still like the real thing as opposed to CGI. It depends, and also depends on the scale of the scene and how dangerous it may be. But back then, it was real explosions. It was squibs, the days when they still use squibs, which also basically has been replaced today with mostly replaced with CGI blood. So it was a different time. Yeah.
No, it was, and it took a long time to make a movie. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't remember how, but I wouldn't be amazed if we were on that for 3 months. Yeah, 12 weeks. Now you get 3 weeks.
Yeah, it has changed quite a bit. Despite being thrillers, both movies actually featured also phenomenal action sequences. So they had a tremendous amount of dialogue, obviously, which was great, but action, and especially in Clear and Present Danger, the scene we just talked about was a standout scene also. Also, Patriot Games, especially the ending of the film, that was actually a reshoot. The scene with Harrison and Sean being on the boat. So that also strikes me as a rather complicated setup.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
We talked about Mexico 3 minutes ago, and this wasn't the first time for you to shoot in Mexico or to have a crew in Mexico. Predator was shot in Mexico, if I recall correctly, and large parts of The Medicine Man also. Would you say that those films, especially Predator, qualify as some of the most intense and difficult ones of your career?
Oh yes. In Mexico, we also shot Romeo and Juliet. I mean, Predator was very interesting. That was Joel Silver, the producer, rang me up and said, I'm over the phone to Australia. Do you mind working with Mexicans? I said, no, I don't even mind working with Americans. And anyway, they flew me to Mexico via Tokyo and Vancouver. And then I flew straight over. And then I found out that was a dodge because of some union deal. I wasn't to go from mainland USA to Mexico. So they flew me from Vancouver to Mexico. I mean, incredible cost. But then I got there and we found out the Mexican crew that they'd got me weren't a film crew. They were actually a support crew. They're basically Mikado, yeah, that's what they called them. A Mikado who were basically a group who were formed to support an American crew coming in who brought all their heads. And all the underlings were. So I had a crew of underlings. And first day of shoot, I told Joel Silver that, with this crew, and you're down for a 6 or 8 week shoot, you can double it. I said that we just got to stumble through everything. And he said, what am I going to do? I said, get some guys from the States. I can't get anyone from the States. So I then had to recruit a whole camera crew and lighting and grips from Australia. So we flew them in over the next few days, and that's the way we did Predator. But that's a side issue. But it was a very interesting adaptation to a somewhat weird situation, which I never really understood, never wanted. But no, I enjoy working in Mexico. But in actual fact, you do walk in with an American, in that case an Australian, but generally an American crew down to sort of a mid-level of crew, and then you have Mexicans. There are, of course, very good Mexican filmmakers, but they spend most of their time making Mexican films. and of course, if they can make the big time, they move over to the States, and they're virtually American by then. So it's a slightly weird situation.
How do you work in an, let's say, exotic environment, on Predator, for instance, or The Medicine Man, because both movies were directed by John McTiernan, who sadly hasn't shot a film in 20 years. How would you describe your collaboration with him and how you two meshed together?
John became a bit turned off then I didn't think he had the interest in the project as much as he did in the first one. I don't know what the reason for that was. And it was very sad, of course. He did jail time for telling a little lie to our government officers. And so yeah, I haven't seen him in years and years and years, which I regret. I really did like him, and we got on well together. And I was exceedingly distressed when I heard of the troubles he'd manufactured for himself.
If I recall correctly, he ordered a phone tap for for producer Charles Roven because he felt that they were kind of, I hope I'm not misremembering, because he felt that they were conspiring against him behind his back. So he then of course said, well, he didn't order it, and then he basically lied to the authorities, and that's the reason why he did some time. Yeah. Predator is one of my personal favorites of the 80s. It has many standout scenes. The scene where they built the trap for the Predator, the scene where Bill Duke makes contact with the Predator for the first time, and everybody is firing their guns like crazy, which must have been deafening. And also the village attack. So, what was a pivotal moment for you when you shot the film?
Well, the interesting part about that was, as I said, it was a real sort of, you had no idea of the potential success of the film while you were shooting it. You thought you were actually maybe a little more B grade than the usual film you'd been with, to be honest. It was incredibly difficult to shoot because we were actually in the jungle. You couldn't use any lighting because once you put up a big light, all it produces was a shadow from one tree to another tree. So you just have people running through shadows. And of course, you had blazing sunlight outside the jungle, but down in the bottom of the jungle, it was relatively dark. So you're shooting daytime at 2:8, which anyway, some people know what that means, and which was very little light relatively, and we'd have teams of about 40, 60 Mexicans who just went out with a bag, a sugar bag, we call them, a Hessian bag, filled it up with leaves, and then every 10 minutes or so, they'd come in and put in new leaves because we trampled the whole leaves flat. And we'd start doing it again. Most of the stuff was done handheld, running hand camera. It was all cheap, and as it turned out, it wasn't nasty, but it certainly was cheap. Shooting, I had one crane there with a right video split in which I shot him climbing up over a edge of a cliff, and all I could see was a leaf, and I had to keep the leaf in the right position. And then I knew the whole thing worked out because I couldn't really see him because the image was so bad. And it really was funny. And I mean, the other thing was we had all these special effects arrive, and they'd done these tests in New York and Los Angeles, where the monster's in a green suit, and the jungle it was a heat camera. It showed heat at various levels of heat at different light sources, and that was the effect. But of course, by the time they brought it down to Mexico, in the area we were doing, the whole jungle was 92 degrees and just was one grave mess on their camera, and it never worked. So, I mean, these sort of disasters were happening every day. We had an open eye arc in a swinging cherry bag and a cherry pick, creating the arc at night. And we had to change a Mexican operator in the arc over every 20 minutes because they'd go mad with the insects. There was just a ball of about 10 foot across of insects around this lamp at night in the jungle, and it used to drive them mad. They couldn't stand it. But that was the way. And it comes out, and of course it's true. I mean, most of my films, the younger people anyway, the only film they know that I've shot was Predator. I mean, anyone at 20 now, that's the guy that shot Predator. They immediately forget about the other 60 or 70 that.
And Don, another favorite of mine, and of course we can't cover everything today. That's impossible. The Man Without a Face. So in the early '90s, you had been teamed up with Mel Gibson, and this was his first film as a director, his directorial debut. So how would he rely on you to, let's say, make everything work because he had been so experienced up until that point?
A lot. It was fun. It was the nearest I ever came to directing, although I wasn't directing. But I mean, I can actually recall saying to Mel, "Look, why don't you do another take? I think something could be better." When we talk about it, and he'd do it, and I have no qualms with any director commenting on the performance as I see it. I mean, the director can tell me to shut up and laugh at me, but I'll still make them. And I think many directors value that and enjoy that process that they have. I've very much become a co-worker. We just sit there together all day, and it becomes a very, very close association. At all levels. Yeah.
How would you describe the advantages and potential disadvantages of working with a first-time director?
I've never really had a problem with first-time directors. I actually enjoy working with them. Generally somebody's handed them a pot of money, so there's a certain level of faith, right? I've had one really bad director in my career, hopeless. I won't go into it, but the rest of them, they've been worth supporting, and if it's a first-time director, you do have to play a game of building up their confidence, but still not letting them make a mistake. But it's very, very quickly that most of them adapt to the situation and prosper real quickly. They're away and running. It's and working with very, very experienced directors, I would guess is more fun because you're challenged from day one. You know what you do is going to be judged pretty strongly, as it should be, and so you got to put your best foot forward, I guess. But it's like life; you find yourself in a situation and you make the best of it.
Yeah, I recently also rewatched The Edge. Great adventure film which stars Anthony Hopkins, Alec Baldwin, and others. And I'm curious because in this film, the environment, the scenery, and so on really serves as another character. So the images are gorgeous. What is especially important when it comes to capturing the beauty of nature?
This will sound weird, but my whole career, I've never analysed what I do. I never find myself going through a process of deduction or analysis. I just do it. I read the script, the actors are there, and I place the camera. Now, a lot of stuff goes on. I know all this, but I'm not, and I do. I have to plan all the lighting ahead and plot everything, but I sort of generally feel that I'm doing what I do on the day, or I'm working more to the moment than I am to the day. You know what I mean? The things I do have to anticipate and plan for and all the rest of it. But the perfect day for me is where it just all falls into place. But it's far more complex than that. And I know that, but I've never made any real effort to understand it.
Well, I guess also a lot of it is based on instincts and storytelling abilities and what you have, let's say, on the inside. The instincts, dramatic instincts, and I guess some of it just can't be learned or taught. You just have to do it.
And it was interesting you mentioned that Edge, because I had a chance to work with Anthony Hopkins, who probably unfairly, but I think he's the best actor I've ever worked with. He really had, and his attitude was the best of any actor I've ever worked with. He was there to do a job, and he'd do it. It was a classic, I call English actor, as opposed to uh, an American actor. And that early in my career, that was very interesting to actually uh, see the difference. Um, but I think all the English actors became American actors. I mean, they adapted to the far more flexible thing.
I would like to briefly talk about your work with Baz Luhrmann. You had shot Romeo and Juliet and also Moulin Rouge. His films are rather colorful. How would you describe that style and how you had to, let's say, perhaps adapt to a different world? Because especially Romeo and Juliet is, of course, a rather exotic film.
Yeah. Well, of course, that was, I think, Baz's second film. Uh, he'd done Strictly Ballroom. It was still virtually unknown when we did Romeo and Juliet. Um, and it was great fun working with him. I mean, it's just you move into another world, a world of fantasy, to a degree, uh, a dramatic fantasy, if you want to. And yeah, I probably Romeo and Juliet is the film I'm most proud of, and we did that in Mexico, uh, all shot in Mexico, and really, really was a um, relatively low budget film. Uh, God, it was about 14 million, and it once again we had a couple of good producers from Fox who came down and could sort of understand what uh, what we were doing. I mean, it was such a cheap thing that by then I developed a relationship with Panavision, and they'd send a lens down supposedly for a week, and it'd stay for 4 or 5 weeks on that payment. In other words, they discounted a lot of the equipment to help us get this project on the way. Uh, it was it was processed in Mexico very, very badly, but I by then I developed a system of being able to test the processing of the negative, because there's the negative and then there's the print, and the negative was always okay, and the prints were terrible, uh, and uh, and so I just kept the good print. When I got back to the States, we had the whole thing reprinted, and by the end of the film, everyone realised they might be on a winner.
Apart from the great look, and also Moulin Rouge has a stellar cinematography, and of course great actors. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, of course, features Leonardo DiCaprio, one of my personal favorites, and a tremendous actor. You had Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge. So, and also throughout your career, you had the chance to work with some phenomenal talents.
From my point of view, and generally I believe it's from theirs, we're all there to do a job, and they're dependent on me to help record their brilliant performance, and yeah, I'm dependent on them for us to stay in a good business, have a great lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that's a mutual appreciation. I think is what I've tried to give and often received.
What's actually next for you? I mean, you have turned 90 years old this year, and it's
I'm slowing right down, I must admit. Still physically pretty good. Um, but there's a small project here which I'm involved with the director and the writing, and it's a personal film, a relatively personal film, and I may end up being a DP. I might even engage another younger DP to do the hard work, and I'll just sit at my monitor and yell orders, which I normally do anyway, as I told you.
And especially in the '90s, you had worked on some great comedies, and I think Mrs. Doubtfire maybe my personal favorite. And you had worked with Chris Columbus again on 9 months. If I may ask, how would you describe the dynamics of shooting a comedy and working with Chris Columbus and also people such as Robin Williams, who really was able to deliver great comedic but also dramatic performances?
Yeah, no, he was a wonderful guy. I worked with on 4 films with him, and we became quite good. I'd say friends at a distance, and yeah, Chris was fun to work with. Very appreciative of what you did. Uh, Very direct guy. Very straightforward. Um, on comedy, once again, see, this is where I have this trouble because it's all. I try to keep it as organic as I can. It's just the same. I'm in the situation. I've got the story to tell. I do it. I do, and as I say, I do most of my work on the day. It's organic, and therefore it's every movie's very different, but very in some ways the same.
Don, I would like to thank you for taking so much time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that, and I had a great time talking to you today, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation too.